Dr. Maram Masarwi is the head of the conference. She is the Dean of the Faculty of Education at Al-Qasemi Academy. She's a senior researcher at Minerva Center in Tel Aviv University and the author of the famous book, Polity-Religization of Bereavement and Trauma in Palestinian Society, Gender, Religion, and Nationalism. Dr. Masarwi is a leading figure in the field of making the impossible possible. And against all odds, she is devoted to equipping her students and acquaintances with the tools necessary to understand different world views and cultural diversities through education. I guess you are longing to hear from her more than having me narrating her rich CV. After all, it is found, the CV, in the public record. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the podium Dr. Maram Masarwi. Please.
Thank you, Wasim, for this very generous, a bit embarrassing introduction. Good morning, everyone. Sabah al-khair. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me first to extend my thanks to the President of Al-Qasemi College, Professor Bashar Said, the Academic Dean, Dr. Yasin Kitani, the Vice Director General, Mr. Mohammed Kitani, and for their genuine support. Special thanks goes to the steering committee of the conference, Dr. Ali Jabarin, Dr. Nail Isa, Dr. Samir Majadli, and Dr. Wissam Majadli. The executive office manager, Ms. Saja Kharbat, and the head of the public relation unit, Mr. Fadi Qardan. I would like also to extend my thanks and regards to the Rosa Luxemburg Fund and El-Afifi and Nazarene tourists for their generous donation to the conference. Let me start by quoting the philosopher and activist Cornel West, who said that the test of any democracy is its relationship to the most vulnerable among its population. As an educator, I want to start with Dr. West and apply his vision to the educational system. The significant test of any school, its relationship to the most vulnerable students. When we think about the most vulnerable students, historically, we are talking about students of low-income background and minority students who traditionally and not only happen to occupy the lowest place in terms of their economic background and the budget allocated for their schools. So, my departure point when accounting for the issue is always from the lenses of the most vulnerable students community. Therefore, the very kind of educators we need are those who can educate students not only to survive in the world, but also on how to understand it and get engaged in leading change processes when necessary. The educational system today imposes a model of education which is in fact fabulous in measuring the highest of trees, but has almost nothing to do with raising the most fundamental questions that drive education. One should ask then, what is knowledge? How it relates to the democratic public life and what is meant by individual and social involvement? How does knowledge assist us in addressing and coping with significant issues such as social injustice? Does it guarantee making us better citizens? What should be done in order to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor? And can an uncontrolled knowledge per se prepare us for global democracy? Unfortunately, the questions that I mentioned earlier are rarely dealt with the educational system. and their absence is resounding. An uncontrolled mixing between politics and moral specific goals may be clear side effect of an instrumental approach, which again leads to confusion between training and education. In other words, that is to say, the objectives of the educational process might be seen as a reflection of the way we receive ourselves and anticipate others to view us. I mean, the formation of our identity and our professional identity in particular. I argue that coping with the question of identity is conditioned. In what sense? Identity is not an objective by itself. It serves to highlight central moral values such as freedom, justice, equality. It is though clear that human loyalty is for the most part aimed at values. The definition of identity in effect stands in a positive correlation with the attempt to reach these values, and for sure this relates to the very definition of the role of the Arab educator or any other educator in general. The challenges we have to deal with as teachers, trainers, and educators are not easy ones. In fact, we must rethink the role of pedagogy much beyond personal and individual narrow considerations. Pedagogy and education must be inspired by values, be capable and to lead changes, providing criticism, daring to challenge the oppressing regulations and systems, and rising the level of occasion in terms of offering alternative diagnosis and perception of reality. In my eyes, education must be a tool for social mobility and a self-emancipation. We cannot offer, speaking of essence of teaching and learning an educational system as a whole without accounting for political of education and without discussing the role of the political system in shaping the essence and content of the educational system. I would say also that educators are the best functioning as good agent of the modern state and society, but unfortunately, most of them are not true agents of children, and certainly they are not found in a place where they can develop and enhance children's intellectual, moral, and capabilities, nor they can cope with the individual and collective identities. It is clear then that we cannot discuss identity only from a psychological perspective. We must add also the ideological, political domain along with one's life experience and try to understand them in the social context. Here, it is urgent, it is urgent need to decompose the social, economic, and political textures which perceive the reality of educators and their students alike through a wider context and scrutinize life experience and other identity-related matters in critical eyes. Therefore, I think educators, when accounting for individual and collective identity, they should address these issues from different domains. Her role in shaping individual identity, the role of other parties in shaping her individual identity, the role of absence figures in shaping her individual identity, leading to values, The teacher and the student's capability to view these axes can position both the students and the educators in more conscious place, full of renewal curiosity, contemplation, and research atmosphere. Education that seeks to mold identity is a cross-disciplinary in essence because identity is not and cannot be restricted to only one class in curricula. In fact, It is the outproduct of a holistic project capable of changing the educational process into reciprocal and fruitful on both sides. Coping with the issue of identity deepens the horizons and stretching the borders of the learning-teaching experience. It also causes education to be liberating but not oppressing, empowering but not alienating, active and not passive, motivating and not demotivating, leading to values but not to corruption. This is the true mission of educators everywhere in my eyes. So, for those who are in charge of qualifying teachers, I say, you have to rise to the level of occasion, be responsible and initiate values-based discussion on how to develop an individual and a professional identity. You must identify the conflicting powers in education and discuss them openly with learners, perhaps in order to question again traditional assumption and hypotheses in the field of education. I also call on policymakers to enable reform through initiating an open dialogue concerning the question of identity in education among all involved parties out of the belief that this might influence teachers and educators and make them successful and loyal change leaders in our society. Finally, I would like to quote an excerpt from Mahmoud Darwish, a pathos poem aimed at Edward Said. And identity, I said. Identity is born, but at the end, it is the creativity of its owner, not hinging on past. I am a multicultural person, inside me, outside me, the renewal, but I belong to the victim's question. Hadn't I were? From there, I would have trained my heart to grow there, the metaphor gazelle. Thank you so much.